All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Justin Elliott. I'm on the conference team. I'm also a developer and IT manager here at Penn State. Today I'm going to talk about systems deployment with blast image config. Have to add the sound effect there. So just a quick audience survey. Can you guys see the slides okay? Yeah. Is everybody still awake? Everybody got caffeine in them? Maybe Lori will step down the lights a little bit. We'll see how. Whoa! We'll go middle level. Well, I just realized we may need it brighter, unfortunately, for the recording, but Dave might be able to give us a hint on that. Is it too dark, Dave? Is that okay to see? Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so who's new to Mac system imaging and deployment? And don't worry, I'm not going to make fun of you. That's why you're here. Okay, excellent. That's great. You're in the right session because even if you don't use blast image config, it's still going to be covering the basics of Mac systems imaging deployment. So it's regardless if it's blast image config, Deploy Studio, Jamf, Casper, all of the other tools, they all basically do the same thing. BIC has some advantages, like the blast image config, I'll say BIC, to keep it short, has some advantages over the other tools, just like they have advantages over BIC. They all have different, so you look at the ones, you evaluate it, and you pick the one you like, and you go with it. So you're not going to hurt my feelings. So, yeah, I don't want to use this. But it's a great overview, but I think you may end up liking it for a lot of reasons, and I'll cover those. So who has used blast image and config before? Anybody? No? You have? Okay. Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, it's been changed a lot over the years. And I finally redid the UI, so it's not as ugly as it used to be. The UI was pretty bad, and I fixed it about a year and a half ago. So, how long have you been using blast image config? About a year. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with an overview. So, not to bore you with the details, but why did we develop it? Why did we even bother doing this? Well, back in 2003, there were no other good tools to do OS 10 deployment. Net Restore wasn't out yet. We needed something internally to get machines deployed very quickly. We had a certain set of standards that we needed to meet for security, image deployment, pre- and post-install or restore scripts. So, setting up the machine to not go to sleep, mounting the file server before it restores an image, setting the firmware settings, so the BIOS firmware, essentially, so you can't boot it up from another device, restoring the image very quickly from a local drive. So there was a need for it, so we developed it. And so I started in 2003. So yeah, BIC is almost 10 years old now, so that's fun for me. It's required and used heavily at Penn State. We use it to image all of our 700 plus Macs. Yes, and as I say up here, Deploy Studio is another good option. You're thinking, why would I use BIC? Well, you're here today to learn about BIC, and if it fits your needs, great. So that's an old picture of macOS 10 too. That's just kind of fun. 10.2.2 was the first version of macOS 10 that included Apple's software restore utilities. Command line utility, the Deploy Studio and others, including blast image config, they wrap and they call it and they use it to distribute system images to the machine very quickly. So they all use the same backend infrastructure. Systems, I guess you'd say. Yep, I covered that. Yeah, it supports 10.2.2 and up to 10.8.3 currently. It'll continue to support Apple's next major OS if they ever release Nittany Lion, which is coming out later this year. Somebody else tweeted about Nittany Lion coming out soon. Okay, good. Yep, used by many in industry and education. So there's also a listserv, so people who contact me sometimes about support. It's on the list. It's great to hear from a lot of folks. And the listserv has been around for a while. I post when I can. There are others at Penn State who also post for support and questions. So it's a good small group and lots of good questions. And Nick asked a question earlier today about system imaging in general. When a new machine comes out and there's a newer image and drivers for it, how do I update an image? And those kinds of discussions directly related to blast image config are on that list. So it's a good community there, I think. It's more targeted towards blast image config, of course. And, yep, it's definitely a critical tool for Penn State. That's not me trying to justify my job existence in programming this tool. I like programming it. I really enjoy it. I enjoy it and the conference a lot. The other parts of my job are a job, so I enjoy it as well. But I really like working on BIC, so I'm really passionate about it. I'm working on this a lot at night. I'm working on it on the weekends. Before, when I'm not needing to spend time with my wife and kid, of course, they always come first. So, but I do work on this a lot for fun, and we need it for our labs as well. Oh, plus a new project that we have at Penn State called the Mac Collaborative Lab Management Program. So basically, it's a thin imaging solution. We have a USB build key that has a bootable OS 10 image on it, boots up, starts to run blast image config, runs automatically using the selected workflow, which I'll cover here. And so it's thin imaging. And then you install a base OS, the machine then restarts, boots up, and automatically runs our Tivoli endpoint manager, which is another agent on the machine. It's a very similar technology and idea that other tools use, where the machine starts up, checks for a server, downloads all the packages, and installs them. Not a novel idea. A lot of people are doing that today with Monkey and other solutions. So it's really good for a thin imaging solution. People have asked me about that, and I said, yes, it's absolutely perfect for that. The goals are meant to be, it's easy to learn and deploy. A lot of people have, trepidation about using other tools as far as getting up to speed. There's a lot to learn. BIC is very simple to begin with by design. I initially designed it for our folks in our technology classrooms to build machines in the labs very quickly so they can pull down a key, click something, and they select a workflow if they're in a lab, or it's at a kiosk or something, or some other setting, and it goes boom, 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 and it just runs complete, because they don't need to know or have to mess around with partition the disk, restore this image. I want to do a secure erase if I'm retiring the Mac. So there are multiple types of workflows you can do, and it made it easy for them. Make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Yep. It's also, after the image is restored, you can use it to restore, to do post-install scripts and restore the network settings on the disk before it boots up. Other tools like Deploy Studio and others have first boot scripts that can change those settings. That's one way to do it as well. Blast image config can do that on the disk before it's been booted. It's using an open source utility called NCUtil. I took over ownership of that. The original developer and I are working together on it. It's open source on Google Code, so that uses that as well. It's definitely it's so portable and self-contained. So you can run it from the USB key. You don't have to use a server. It's very fast. It's lightweight. You're interested, double-click, run, ask you for admin permission, because you need administrative permissions to run whenever you change a disk and other settings on the machine. So, and it's streamlined automation. It's meant to be, like I said, very quick and fast, so it doesn't hang up users. By default, if you download it, it's going to go into a very manual process. Next, next, next. A lot of people call it a wizard. It is meant to be a wizard because it's meant to step people through the process, very similarly to other deployment tools. And again, it's geared towards folks who just want to run and go. I use it myself all the time, actually, for a quick restore of machines, too. So, intended users are Mac system admins, like us. I use it. You can use it for servers. You can use it for your own testing machines, for demonstrations. The software that you saw running before this the conference session was MCP. That's running on a laptop that I imaged with BIC. Sets it all up, installs, and it's good to go. Computer lab admins, field techs. So if you're the system admins and you want to give somebody a build key, who you support, and you're doing the configuration of blast image config and the imaging, you just want to have somebody, here, go do this, boot the machine up, hold the option key, select the bootable device that blast image config is on, run up, select this workflow, and just go. So it's great for those folks as well. And lastly, IT staff who also want to image machines for faculty, or if you're, in corporates, then, secretaries' desktops, things like that. People ask me the question of who it's for, because that's definitely what it's for. Yeah, it's good for, what is it good for? It's useful for setting up a new machine out of the box. If you have a golden master that you want to use, that's great. You can restore that. You can also use InstaDMG. So InstaDMG, if you're not familiar with it, it's a great utility. It's been around for years. It takes an OS 10 installer and creates a completely new, never booted system image. And never booted is a really good thing, because whenever you boot up a Mac, the operating system is going to look at all the drivers and hardware that are specific to that machine. So if you've ever seen if you have an older Mac, you take an image off of it, and you move it to another machine, and it still boots it. But sometimes the network settings look kind of weird. You'll see an extra entry for Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2, but they're grayed out. That's because in the background of the OS, those were mapped to a different hardware layer, and so OS 10 keeps that corrupt around, right? InstaDMG images are clean. So in other words, it's as if you had actually gone through the installer, installed it on the Mac, and then you booted it. So InstaDMG is highly recommended. It works well with blast image config, too. Rather, you create the image with InstaDMG or disk utility, and then blast image config uses that image that you've set up and created, and then that puts it on to the disk. So this restores an image. This doesn't create an image. It's great for retiring Macs. So we use this in our labs. Make sure I got it. Yep, we can, okay. So it can also secure erase the disk. Years ago, when we were getting ready to securely erase some machines in our labs, it's a long process. It can take hours to securely erase it. So because it's such a long process, I asked ProSoft Engineering, acting like I was one of their customers. I said, hey, I zeroed out my disk. Can I recover any of the data off this drive? If I zeroed it out, they go, oh, no, you're done. You can't get the data back. I'm like, okay, great, perfect. And then I wrote and posted on Mac Enterprise a couple of years, maybe it was 2 or 3 years ago, and some nice gentleman replied back to me directly and gave me this huge email. If you're in this room, thank you. But he gave me a really good email like, well, here's today why you can't recover from the zero out and all that. And I said, okay, great. So it's also great for setting up a workflow to securely erase the machine and then remove the firmware settings if you hadn't, so you can then give it away completely erased and with no firmware security. So it's the whole life cycle. Out of the box and give away or bury. But Macs last forever, right? Sure. But system requirements. So it's now 10.6 for BIC 3.0. Hopefully everybody's at least at 10.6.0. If you're not, the old version of 2.9 is still around. It's available for download, but no longer supported. And of course, an Intel Mac today running 10.8.3. I'm going to WWDC this year. Luckily got in. Yeah, that was lucky. And I'll continue, of course, to develop it for the next major OS version, because we need it for our labs as well. So that's definitely on the roadmap. You don't need a system disk image. Again, you create with either instaDMG or disk utility. So those, I have documentation on my website, and don't worry, you'll be able to download the slides, as well as providing you with URLs of where to go for all the documentation. The documentation on my website, that is, covers how to use BIC, demonstration videos, and how to create your master system disk images. Obviously, you need a Mac to restore the image to. So that's kind of implied. And you'll need an internal hard drive or any actual volume, actually. It can be internal or external. Okay, so getting started. So if you have questions, we're trying to move the questions more to the Q&A through the end. I'll try to slow down on talking. I tend to talk fast. But there will be time at the end for Q&A. If you were here last year for the demos, for the presentation, rather, I had a lot of demos. That reduced the amount of time for Q&A. I don't want to do that this year. I want to make sure we leave time for Q&A. If you have a quick question, definitely by all means, or clarification, please speak up. I'm glad to answer. So once you download it, it's a disk image. You'll just drag in, you need to be logged in as an administrator user. And if you have an external build drive, you'll create that account, download it, and then install Blast-Image config folder, dragging it to the applications folder. So it's a drag install. That's it. It's all self-contained in that folder. Yep. So it's pretty straightforward. Simple install. Once you've created your system disk image, and the documentation on how to do that, again, is on my website, but it's anywhere. You can use disk utility or any of the other tools that create them, DMG, all of those. And there's also the URL above on how to create more of those, the documentation on how to create the system disk images. But also, I also have documentation there on how to create the recovery partition image as well. So that's available at that URL also. Once you've created your master disk image, you'd actually copy it to the Restore Images folder. So in the Blast-Image config, there's the application. I have a pointer here somewhere. That's not a pointer. Anyway, here's my pointer. So there's the application, Blast-Image config in the upper left-hand corner, documentation, various folders, logs, and workflows, and I'll cover those here in a minute. And another application I'll get to, the BIC Firmware Passwords Editor. We'll talk about that. So 2 applications there. So I've got a manual run demo. So last year I did a lot of demos, and I had a bunch of laptops up here, and I had a server, and I had a video switcher, and all of the demos worked, right? It took a lot of time to switch between video, and everybody was like, okay, I'm watching, okay, well, we'll just have it. It was too much. It was a lot for me, too. So you'll have to forgive me for doing a video. It's been working since 2003, so it does work, but I'm doing a video because it's going to help speed the process up. So what we're going to see is booting with an OS X 10.8.3, running Blast-Image config, the current version, and having a master system disk image. And again, it's not. This is a manual run, so this has not been fully automated. So I'm going to breeze through it, just to save us some time. Okay, so now what you see here, obviously, yeah, the Tron icons. All right, awesome. In this case, I'm still booted from my internal drive, but I have 2 volumes, Blasphemous config applications in the upper right-hand corner. I've configured, over years of developing Blasphemous config, there have been a few times that since I'm writing a utility that erases a hard drive and restores an image, I've added in safety features for myself and others to use, where, this happened in one of our labs. We had a lab podium Mac, right? And they had an external hard drive that was a scratch disk for videos, right? And they had a lot of videos from the semester. You can probably see where I'm going here. Blasphemous config, an early version, scan for all disks, pick the first one. Oh, that looks good, sure. Erase, restore. Not the Mac's internal hard drive. It was the scratch disk. And we're like, ah. So, yeah, that was a feature I added. So there's a way to, it's very easy. It's in the documentation. Basically, you open up the terminal, and you do a touch on a file .blasphemous config, ignore this one. Really long file name. It won't include it in the list of disks to restore. So, and I did that for my own sanity too, so I don't need data. They're good backup stuff. So here we're going. So what we're going to do is there's an external USB drive on the desktop. I'm going to press the space bar, open up the folder, select Blasphemous config. Hold on one second. Yes, I put it on the desktop to make it easier for the demo. That's all right. That's okay. Keep it coming. What's your name again? Just kidding. It's all good. You're right. I should have made an alias to the applications folder. You're right. I like it. It's good. All right. So the application folder that should be in the folder that should be in the applications folder. I double click on that. Launch Blasphemous config and type in the admin password. This is just a manual. This is the default. Here I am trying to talk with my cursor apparently. Shoot. Sorry guys. Alright, so there I am launching it. Okay, and then it launches. Now I'm going to pause here. So, it already knows the administrator account. You type in your password. At this point, we're not going to tell it to remember this password in my keychain. But that option is there in case for when we want to do auto run, it's going to need to store it in the keychain so that it can say, look in the keychain, has the admin's password been stored? Yes, use that, try that, and then auto run. You have to do that. It sounds like a security issue, but it's not, and I'll explain why when we get further. Alright, so you type in the password, you click OK. The default preferences is the default workload that it ships with. It has to have 1 to start with, and you can manually edit that, but it doesn't. Auto run is turned off and has very safe defaults so that, you don't lock yourself out of your machine and enable firmware security and you don't remember what the password is, and so it's a very safe setting to start with. If you click next, and on this would be the stage where you want to change the BIOS, I'm saying that for Windows folks, the EFI, firmware security. This would prevent users in your labs from booting up from another device, right? So you have the different options. Don't modify it, leave it as is, or turn it off. If it's already on, it'll just turn it off. If it's off already, it'll continue to be off. And command is the one you really want to use. That's the one that you hold down the option key. It'll put up a boot picker screen and show you the password, and then you can select volumes from there of which one you want to boot from. The full is not recommended, as it says not recommended. That had different behaviors on earlier Macs, and we'll look at Rich. Do you know how that behaves on your Intel Macs, or anybody? The full mode? Yeah, it generally has used to break into a command line, so it's still there. Some folks in government agencies wanted to use that level, so that's why that's there. All right. So click on command, and then you can say username and password. And for this demo, though, I left it off because if I get home tonight after the party and I'm really tired and I go to boot tomorrow morning and I hold down the option key, I won't remember what the password is. Yes, sir. Right. That's a very good question because I just wrote another utility for our labs that has to do the same thing. In the earlier versions of Apple's security, there was a tech article on the PowerPC-based Macs. You could not type the letter U as your password, as part of the password, yeah, because it didn't XOR and turn it to no. Anyway, if you can type it on the Apple keyboard, Apple is supposed to be supporting that. So if you type it on your Mac keyboard, it should be able to support it. However, with that, we're still careful and we do A through Z, upper lower numbers, and we still do, you know, the all of the ampersands, quotes, and things like that. So that's generally what we're doing. Okay, that's good to know, because I've been watching them, because that's where I was watching, excuse me, about SetReg prop tool for firmware security. That's good to know. They probably did that to be safe, because it's hard to get an answer out of Apple sometimes on that. I did a strings on the binary to say, what's the checking for? So that's a good point. So yeah. No, I'll write it down to investigate further. That's why I have this out. So that's a good point. Yeah, I'm here to learn as well, so these are good points. Verify. Yeah, because that was something that we need to know that too. It was hard to get clarification on that. So for now, they can be really long passwords. So use long passwords, upper lowercase, and 6?
6.
Okay. Okay. Well, I remember old versions of OS 10 were limited to 8 characters, and I would type a 12-character password, and I know I screwed up the last few. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's old days of Unix underpinnings and so on. Anyway. Here's where you can run a pre and post restore script. You could have it mount, automatically mount servers, set the machine not to sleep, all sorts of things. I'll have an auto run where this will run, calls a script, and it does actually mount. It's running from a netboot, and it'll automatic, netboot image that is, and it'll automatically mount an AFP file server, which this master image is stored on, and that's in the demo. So that's what you would do at this stage. I believe in this one, I'm doing probably just do not disable computer disk display and sleep. So that's turning off. So the machine doesn't go to sleep when you're doing the middle of restore, right? So because sometimes, you set up an image, and I've done this too. I've done this myself, where I built a new build key and I forgot to turn off the screensaver. Don't go to sleep, and all this. You come back and the machine is asleep, and it didn't finish more than half of your machine. Like, so that's a great place to put that kind of stuff so it stays awake. You can change the date and time if you want to here. It's not essential to do this because, machines, if your network is configured correctly and your DNS resolves correctly on boot up, which isn't always the case, you want your time to be accurate for Kerberos and things like that. Excuse me. Okay. So this was added for an option when we had issues in our labs with those things not working and the time not being right. So if the time's off by more than 5 minutes, some authentication systems won't work correctly. So that's why that's important to have that up to date. You can use your smartphone, of course, because those are actually really accurate. This is where you would select the settings you want the machine to have when it gets restored. Don't touch it or change. Now, this is built-in Ethernet. This is not going to change airport settings. This is for built-in only. DHCP and static IP. Backing up the airport really quickly. If you made an image, I've had really good luck with this. If you make your master image have airport enabled and DHCP and you've got an SSID selected, that's actually working pretty well through imaging. Sometimes it hasn't selected it correctly, but you can also script it once the machine boots up. But it's been pretty lucky for that. Alright, so next, this is where you would configure the computer sharing names. So in this case, you can not touch them or you configure them, and this is the, local bonjour host name and the computer name. One caveat about this. This will not work on an InstaDMG image. It's a current bug in InstaUtil that I'm going to look at after the conference is over. So, so on a never booted system, and I know the issue, but it's easy to fix. We just need to get time to get to it. Okay. This is where you can type it in, and manually doing it, of course, takes time. And I'm going to click the insert serial number button. That'll actually take the MAC serial number and put it in there, because that's a nice identifier, unique in the lab. When you're doing computer sharing names, it's generally a good idea to have something that's unique, because otherwise what's going to happen is the Mac is going to boot up, it's going to broadcast its name, and it's going to have a name collision with somebody else, and it says, oh, somebody else is using the same name, so I changed it to blah. You're like, okay, great, go away. So make them unique. Adding the serial number is one way to do that. That can be automated, or inserting the serial number into the computer name. All right, so next. All right, now this is where it's going to discover all the local disks. And it's only going to show the external drive, because as I mentioned earlier, it's excluding my boot volume and my data volume, which I don't want it to touch. So that's why I moved the window over. Up at the top is the master system disk image that I've added to a folder. External USB drive. And you have some other options. Of course, create single partition, So that removes the recovery partition. In some places, folks want to do that. You can secure erase before the restore. That'll tell to erase the disk before you continue. Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah. It can be, it's local to the drive there, but master disk image can be restored over HTTP, and I'll cover that too. But HTTP, any mounted file server volume, SMB or AFP over HTTP, ASR multicast server, that's a trick to get configured, but it is possible and it works pretty well once you get it working. But talk to your network admins if you're not the network admins first about multicast, because they may go, multicast can take down your networks if you're not careful about how it's configured. But it's really fast when it works well. Good question. And then you can enable verification is slower if you want to do that, but on personal machines, for lab machines, we don't do that because we want it to be as fast as possible, right? But for somebody, your CEO, or somebody really important, you probably want to make sure if you're doing a full disk restore, I would recommend enabling verification. Make sure. Okay, so, and there I am reading with the cursor again. So we'll click restore. It's a fast restore, but I'm not going to wait wait for the whole full restore. So calculating, I should mention that quickly. ASR, by default, doesn't check to see if the disk image you're going to restore to a disk will fit on it. It'll just say, okay, erase the disk. Okay, now put the disk image on. Oh, it doesn't fit. Oh, well, I'm sorry, I left you with the disk that's erased, with no data. Really? It does that. That was frustrating to us because in our labs, and this would apply to any environment, you're supporting Macs, if it can't restore the image and it doesn't fit, I want the machine to still be bootable. Even if it's an old image, we'll come back to it, we'll give a new hard drive, or we'll give it a smaller image, or whatever, right? So, blast into config, I check to make sure, calculate the image data size it's going to require, the disk that's selected, will it fit? Yes. Go. That was one thing that drove us nuts. So, it does do that check. Okay, so restoring, I'm going to slide if you're okay with that. I don't want to bore you guys. What's that? I know, yeah, right? Exactly, yeah, if I could just fast forward. Yeah, the movie Click, Adam Sandler, it was pretty funny. Yeah, he's walking the dog and he's waiting for, the dog to do his thing. Okay, so now it's done, and it's now obtaining the local disks, so it's looking to see again what has been done. Now it's looking at the disk that got restored and it's verifying the health. This is a verified disk in disk utility. Exact same thing, right? We're doing that because, I added that because it was possible, years ago, and Apple may have fixed this, it was possible to actually create a disk image from a machine, a disk that was slightly not right, it had some issues, even, I don't know how this happened, but it did. Basically, the master disk image was slightly corrupt. It restored it and verified it. It said it was good for verification. However, the tree structure, the file directory, the file allocation table was not quite right. So this now does that. This has been in there for a while to say, okay, the data's been restored. Is the disk actually healthy after it got restored? So it adds that too. That saved us a lot of headaches. In the labs, it used to be this machine has an I/O error. Okay. So you're going to see the disk drive, the external USB appear on the right-hand side, and Time Machine's going to ask me, of course, hey, do you want to do this stuff? And I'll say, no. So now it's remounting the disk. It's called MCP-N because that's the master image I use for the MCP laptops. -N was just the number I changed. Later. Manually. You can script changing the disk name, but. Alright, so now it's successfully restored it. Now here we're going to hit next. Change. You can see how this is a very manual process of clicking, right? That's why auto run is enabled on the later ones. Change the disk as a startup disk, which there were 2 checkboxes there. Back up. Set the startup disk. So you go to the, make sure, yep. 2 different options. One, it's as if you do it through the command line, which is what Vic is doing in the background, whenever you go to the Apple menu, system preferences, and you click startup disk does the same thing. It does these 2 things. It changes the firmware in the machine to say boot from this device and make that drive bootable. In other words, enable bootable bits on it, less the drive is what's called. That's what this stage does. So people are saying, well, why would I want to have those options here, off or on? Well, you may not want to actually, you may want to do a restoration of a bunch of drives, and you may not want this machine to ever boot from that drive, right? You may want it to, you may be doing a target disk mode of a machine restore, so you don't want to ever boot from that machine because it won't be there when you're done imaging it. So that's why those options are available. And this is the post restore script. This is where you could do anything like installing. You may not be able to see it from the back. I apologize. I was trying to make the video small, or so I can enlarge it as much as possible. For Snapple script setup, there are some default scripts that are included with Blasphemous config that do these things. Post install packages, that was something that Rusty and I worked together on. He wrote that for BIC, so that was pretty cool. And you can print, where's the restore? There it is. Okay. Partition and restore the line, recover HD. It's not just the line, it's now the mount line. So there's a script that can restore that recovery partition as well. So it'll look at the disk, make the partition for the recovery drive, and install that. I've got instructions, documentation for that script on my site. I've also hosted it on GitHub as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and just run through. We'll just print out some arguments. I think that's the one I selected. Yeah, there's the example, and then we're going to print all arguments. And I showed that because it went by too fast, but then the post restore script, I'm passing a bunch of variables to it, so you can use those in your own scripts. The drive that was restored, if there's something you want to do in addition to it, the IP that was restored, if it was that, or if it's DHCP. So some people want to use those values for their post-install scripts. Run an email program that says, hey, I checked in, or it was restored, all sorts of things like that. Here's where you could do a graceful quit, restart, or shutdown. But, of course, in this case, I did a quit. And that's it. So that's the manual run. Very manual process, right? But I did that so that we all had an understanding of what it was involving. Okay. So let's talk about workflows now. Workflows are the piece that you really want to get into because that's the thing that helps you do all of these certain steps. The workflows lays out what it should do in all the default cases. So when BIC was first launched, there was a workflow option at the very beginning. And it'll display all of them that you've configured it for. You can label them whatever you want, Fall 2013 Labs. And beneath that is a text box that will say what it does. So that's for, again, the field text in our case. And yourself if you want to add more data to it. It's more geeky. So I keep that as non-technical as I can, so it's very easy for them to read through, right? But you can throw in anything you want to there. Just plain text. I was hoping to have this done by the conference, Workflows Manager version 1.0. This was something that people asked for last year, because currently creating workflows is a manual process by editing a text file. Well, about two months ago, the conference team said, hey, it'd be really nice if we had another program that did the between the sessions thing of just playing all that and playing all the music and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what took up the time, which is fine because that was fun. So I didn't get to this. This I will have available later this year. So the next stage is I'm about to show you our text-based editing of the workflows and the work settings. That will go away later this year once I finish this. This is in alpha. This is how it's going to look. So it will be available. Oh, wow, I sound like a business by saying Q4. Sorry. Kind of stodgy, I guess. Anyway, so it's a workflow editor, and on the left-hand side, again, I apologize, it looks like I might be out of focus a little bit. You'll have your workflows list available, and you can then plus or minus add and remove. You'll be able to switch them around in different orders. The workflows that are listed up at the top there, I don't want to risk going back in my play movie, are the ones that, again, appear at that window. So workflows manager editor, is going to edit the workflows as one application. BIC will then run and display them and read that file of what you configured in here. The reason I separated the applications is, again, if it was, in the case of Blasphemous config, if field techs are using this, using Blasphemous config, I don't want them mucking around with the workflows. They could if they went to the Finder and opened up text files, but I don't want to make it enticing for them to do that, right? Kind of want to separate that a little bit, so that's why I chose not to do that way. Anyway, so you have your different workflows, workflow name, description. You can change also the file name that it's using. I apologize. I wish I had a pointer here. In the upper right-hand corner, right next to workflows, there's a stage option. Maybe I'll get my cursor out. Nope. Okay. There's a stage pop-up. And this is the current UI. This may change by the end of the year, but I've been talking with Apple WWDC developer relations and getting to talk to them for half an hour at a time and asking them UI design. So I've had some help from them on this too. Not saying it's great. I'm saying that's the way it is today, and I'm pretty happy when they had some good suggestions. At any rate, the stage at the top is where you would change the different settings. So the name, description, file name, or settings like the restore system image. So there will be GUI options for all of the options that normally were edited in text. So, for example, restore system image stage. That's the one where we selected the master disk image, the disk to restore to, and all of the other options like the single partition, secure erase, all of those options. That's where the others would come into play here. So the stage was changed from the initial top item to restore system image. And then you'd have all of your different options there. Yes, no, image, you could select the master image where it resides, what kind of image it is. Extras would be additional settings as far as secure settings, other things like that. So I'm shooting to have this done by the end of the year. Until then, you currently have to, and it's an easy process, but one I want to try and get rid of if I can. But it's an easy edit to do. In the blast image config folder, there's a workflows folder. You can see it by the path up on the little folder name there. Again, it's a little hard, but the slides will be available. So it's a workflows.xml file and a workflows folder. That file, excuse me, is easy to edit, and basically it's every time you want to make a new section for a workflow, you would copy and duplicate the text inside the red square, essentially, rounded rect. And then you could edit the description, the display name, so I made it as pretty obvious of what those fields are. And you can use your favorite text editor, whatever you want to use there. And again, this is the process that will be going away later this year once I have a new workflow editor ready to go. All right, so examples of use of different workflows. Kind of touched base on these a little bit. But this is where you would use, let's say, for example, you have one same base image of 10.8.3, but you want to change a few things about it, depending on if it's a lab machine or a kiosk or secretary or staff person's machine or faculty or CEO or whatever. This is where you could add extra settings to run different pre and post restore scripts, use the same disk image, change the firmware settings. So for lab, you want firmware enabled. On someone's personal laptop, you probably don't want firmware enabled. That's where the use of different workflows would come in really handy. Retiring access I touched on as well. So you could securely erase the disk with the firmware security, because those are yet another workflow. So where it would say workflow fall 2013 lab, you could say secure and erase machine for retire, something like that. And then that's very obvious to the field text saying, oh, I want secure and erase. Pick that one. Boom. And then it would go through the options and perform the tasks that you specified. Okay, so the different workflow configs. Don't worry, I'm not going to enlarge this and expect anybody to remember all the commands. They are well documented on the website. I'm not going to go through each of them because that bore the heck out of you. You might be bored now. I mean, if you are, I apologize. But all those settings are pretty obvious, but that's where the workflow editor is going to help with that. But those are thoroughly documented on the website, and they're pretty straightforward of what does what. And they're easy to change in the text file. They're not yet XML, but I'm working on that in the next version. But once again, we'll use the GUI. I'll be able to use the GUI too, and I don't have to edit the text files. The text is easy to edit for now. Online documentation. Is that not? I try to make it a tiny URL, but that's not very tiny. At any rate, so BEC workflow manual is really what that's supposed to mean. It's, so that's where you can find the documentation. But if you search for blast image config on Google, you'll find the link for the documentation as well as the workflows information. Okay, we'll talk about firmware security. So firmware security, Apple had some new requirements starting in 2011. So this is something that has affected all system image restore utilities that can configure firmware security, right? This is not something that's don't blame BIC. This annoyed me too. There used to be a way on older machines where if you nail the firmware security, you forgot what the password is, you could say, okay, I need to reset it, pull it, turn the machine off, remove some RAM, make the RAM change, that is, boot it up holding some keys, and it would reset the password for you. Because Apple's stance was, if you get inside the machine, the game's over, right? Because you could open up and get the hard drive out and get data. Well, they changed it so that no longer works. So they moved to a new tool, setreg-prop tool, which is a command line utility buried in their utility that I'll cover here in a minute. So, yeah, the open firmware password tool will no longer work. If anybody remembers that title or that name of that tool, we posted it for a while on Mac Enterprise. I'll leave it at that. Okay, so the setreg prop tool is a command line tool binary that's buried in their GUI application. Their GUI application is actually called Firmware Utility, I believe. Firmware Security Utility or Firmware Utility. It's the utility that Apple doesn't add anywhere except to the macOS 10 installer. It's under the menu option. When you boot up and you go to install OS 10, you'll see it up at the top. It's that particular application on that. So it does all the heavy lifting in Apple's firmware password utility. Surprisingly, if you run from the command line, it has a very good help dump. So it's actually, they knew that people were like us were going to be using it to script and use it for our own needs. I wish they would install it in the default location on OS 10 machines, but they may be not doing that on purpose because they don't want people to accidentally configure a machine and lock themselves out. Yes, I should mention something too. I'll mention the implications of if you do lock yourself out. Configures all the firmware security modes. Okay. So the portion that I talked about cannot reset firmware passwords with old methods. That's important. Setreg prop tool. The newer machines that require it, you must remember the passwords that you used on that machine. If you don't, you will not be able to unlock it, and you'll have to call AppleCare or GSX accounts and sit on the phone for 2 hours to unlock that particular one machine. Don't lose your passwords with that. You'll also need another previous password to change it to a new one if it is enabled. I wrote a utility that helps to take care of that, but that's something to be aware of. Okay, so let's talk about installing it. Now, you're probably wondering, why doesn't BIC include this as a download in the download disk, right? It's illegal to do that. I'm talking to you Deploy Studio guys. No, just kidding. I like it. It's a good tool. They're doing it. I believe setreg prop tool is included with the binary of Deploy Studio. That's great. I can't legally do it at Penn State because I'm very identifiable, and I don't want Apple knocking on my door saying you can't redistribute this with it. I wish I could. I can't. I'm going to write a utility after workflow editor to automatically make the install process for setreg prop tool easier. But I think it's pretty easy. As system admins, we should be comfortable with the command line, and the demo that I'll show you is all command line. It's really simple, straightforward. So anyway, so there's there's a script included. It's Perl. Yes, I know it's not Python. I know Python's hot and cool, and it is. But Perl is what it's written in. It's what I know. There's the not so tiny URL again, and those are documentation for 10.6, 10.7, and 10.8. Currently, the documentation says 10.7. It's also 10.8. I just need to update the link to say and 10.8, but it does work. So here's an install demo. And so on the right hand, so I'll go through it. Still getting the application folder that should be in the applications folder, but it isn't. Is on the. I'm just going to keep running with that. I think it's funny. I like it. On the right hand side, there's the install OS 10 Mountain Lion installer. You need that because it's going to open that up. A lot of stuff's going to happen on screen here. After I press the space bar, you're going to see what's going to happen. This is the install process of installing setreg prop tool. It's going to open up that package. It's going to mount a disk image. Inside of that, it's going to mount yet another disk image, and it's digging through to get to the setreg prop tool binary. Okay, so this script will automate that process. So we open up the folder, navigate down to resources, look for the setreg prop tool folder, and there's the script. It even says Perl. How pretty. Okay, so now we'll launch terminal. And at the bottom, I'm going to type in sudo. Are people familiar with what sudo does? Basically, it will let you run something with administrator privileges once you supply your administrator password. And you need to do that. It probably would run without it, but you're already logged in as admin. You're configuring an admin tool, so it needs that. All right, so let me back up here a little bit. I was rambling while it was running. So we'll start over. I'll be more cryptic and quiet. All right, open up the folder, setreg prop tool. Yep. Okay, move the icon around. Okay, cool. And then it will, I apologize for the thing at the bottom. It should go away. No. Okay, so basically what I've done there, it's hard to see at the bottom. I'm not sure why it won't let me move that away, but if anyone knows how to hide that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So basically what happened is here, sudo, I dragged the Perl script into the window, gives the whole full path. You don't have to type it out, right? That's the nice thing about terminal. And then I dragged the install OS 10 Mountain Lion image to the window as well after that. So now it has the script. So you're running it with sudo admin rights, this script, and here's the Mountain Lion installer. The rest is all automatic. and it's going to put set reg prop tool in the window where the Perl script is located currently. Because blast image config, again, needs that binary to be able to configure firmware security. This is a lot. Alright, so here it goes. So now I typed in the password, it's mounting a disk image in the background, it checks them to make sure they're healthy. It's going to mount another disk image, verified, and then click in the window so you can see and now it's done. And now you'll see in the upper, yep, there it is. Ta-da! So that was the installation process. You open up terminal, type in sudo, drag that in, drag the installer in, you're done. So it's pretty easy to install. Yes, I'll write a GUI wrap around it. Sorry? Don't click what? So, oh yeah, you mean the bar at the bottom? Yeah. Oh, yeah, as far as, you mean don't click in the Finder when the script is running, that thing? No, what I did is I made it, no, I clicked, yeah, if you unmounted it while I was trying to mount the disk images, yes. The reason I clicked the terminal window on the video is so we could all see what the terminal was doing. So it wouldn't hurt, but it does unmount, it unmounts the disk images, just to be clean up after itself. All it did was mount them and copy set reg prop tool. So that's the installation of that. Alright. Okay, so once that's installed, there's another utility called Firmware Password Editor. I don't believe Deploy Studio still does this. This is a way of blast image config can keep track of the old passwords in a secure database file when it launches, right? This is a tool I demoed last year. I'm not going to demo it this year. The documentation is pretty good. But basically, it creates a database file encrypted on the disk. So if your build key gets stolen, that encrypted disk is AES 128-bit, 256 actually. It's secure. So you would open that, and then you can see all of the passwords that it has stored in the previous history. So it's a password history document. Blast image config needs that because it tries to, if you change your firmware password, it needs to read the previous ones that you've used, and it uses the database that this application can be used to configure. So again, this is a password history database tool that's included with blast image config. And I can show people, if we have a few minutes afterwards, I can show you how that works if you want to know more about that. But yeah, it's for password history because you need to have that information. Okay. Yes. It's just the last password of the machine. Correct. It only remembers the last one. Good question. So yeah, you can. It's still a good idea to still add your whole history there in case you have, you know where I'm going here. You have a bunch of older machines and you haven't gotten to it yet, and that one happens to be Justin and Heidi and Zach and passwords. So not that those are family names or anything. So there's an auto run. So the auto run, it's pretty obvious. It's going to speed the process up. It allows it to decrypt the firmware password database. So that option, when blast image config was first launched and you'd entered in the password, I didn't check the box to say store the password. This will be auto run. You check that box. You enter the password once, quit out of blast image config. It's done. We launch it. Now it looks in the keychain and says, oh, the password's there. I'm going to use that same password to decrypt the database history database file that has all of the history of the previous passwords. Good to go. And it can run without prompting you for an administrator password. So it saves a lot of time in that process. So greatly speeds up the restore process. So yeah, there it is highlighted. And it's checked. Remember this password in my keychain. We'll store that. And your workflow should have that key enabled to set to yes. Yes, sir.
So you get that key that you have that to log into the user because the application
I don't have that currently encoded, but I could. But yeah, but that's been requested by a few folks. But in our lab machines, since they have to do a lot of things like running disk utility and other things too, it's easier for them to do that from their administrator, and they already know the password of that machine. So yeah, it's a good question. It's an easy feature to add, but may add it someday. Okay. So yeah, the important thing is add auto run to the workflow in order for it to actually run in the full mode. There are more documentation settings. Again, I don't want to go over that because I'd be bored by it too. But they're well documented. So here's an auto run demo. Now this, forgive me, this is running an old version. This is an older version. This was from last year when I had the alpha out. This is version 3.0, alpha 2. What's going to happen here is we've already booted up BIC with a netboot Restore HD in the upper right-hand corner. The internal Mac's hard drive is called Macintosh HD. This is running 10.7, but it's the same thing. The previous video was 10.8. This is 10.7 because it's a good video for net booting demonstration, right? So it's going to run through the whole entire process. Don't worry, I'm not going to narrate all the steps. I'm just going to show you what it looks like when it does it. This is going to automatically auto-mount a server. It's set the firmware setting. It's now running a script. It's going to mount the server over there. It did, but it moved the icon. There it is. And that's the old UI design. I changed a few things. So now the disk is stored on that server volume, system disk images. The disk images / volumes, that whole thing, that's actually the AFP mounted server volume. Okay? Could be SMB, AFP, whatever you have. Should be fine. Now it unmounts the internal disk. It's restoring. I haven't had to click anything except for just run. And it might be a faster restore. Gig E at home is really nice. Yeah, I'm not going to wait for that. And it looks for, I think we all know the rest. Obtaining, verifying. And, yeah. Let's just jump ahead. Hope everybody's okay with me doing this. Okay. So, on the right-hand side, you'll see that now the new drive is fall 2012 HD. So it's restored it with a new image that was there automatically. And now, oh, shoot. Sorry. Come on. Apologies. Okay, I give up. It hates me. So, anyway. Now is where it would actually create the automatic network location, apply the settings that I told it to do, bless the drive, run a post install, and quit automatically. Or you could restart or shut down if you want. So if you have a USB key and you boot in the machine, boot it up, log in, run BIC, select the workflow, walk away. And configure the auto run workflow to shut down the machine. When they're all powered down, you know they're done. Or you can reboot. Well, that's good to go. No, unfortunately we don't, because this is changing soon, finally, I think. We don't, our networking administrators on the campus backbone don't allow DHCP. We use static IPs in the labs. So net booting requires DHCP. And net booting through subnets is pretty intensive. So net booting is something that, if I could do it, I would definitely do net booting instead. I don't want to have to carry around a USB stick or a FireWire drive. I'd rather net boot the entire time. And BIC is really easy to make a net boot image of. You just install the OS. Use Apple's deployment tools. Server's super cheap now. Configure a BIC to auto-run at login time. And the docs are on the website of how to do this. And then you make your net install. It's real simple. I mean, it was, and I'm not just saying that to sell BIC or anything, but it's a simple process to do. Yeah, net booting, if you can do it, is the way to go. And BIC is perfect. It works well on the thin deployment too, because your image is already really small, so it takes like minutes to restore it. We have a USB key, a build key. Total boot up time and restore and shut down, 6 minutes. That's reasonable. It's okay. But you have to have that key, which is kind of annoying. So, I agree. Use the network when you can. Using BIC and deployment, so how would I use it? I just kind of covered this. You'd add it to the login items as you log in, and you can have FireWire or Thunderbolt disks, anything you can get. You can get an external SSD, Thunderbolt, awesome. Or USB flash drives. The recent USB 3.0 flash drives that I've used are wicked fast. I was surprised. There was one that I thought I hadn't selected it to boot from. I was on a machine that had USB 2.0 actually. But not all USB keys are created the same. Some of them we look for actually have like a retract. Let me actually have it on me. Yep. So there's one that's got a retractable and it's really fast. Do benchmarking on them. They vary a lot. Depends on what chipset in them. You're generally going to pay more for it, but the performance is a lot better on some of them, so I'd recommend it if you're going to use a USB flash drive. Net booting master image, we mentioned that. You'd edit your workflows, specify you want to restore the image, and then you could use that as your restore process. So, okay, good. So tips and tricks. Like I mentioned, it works great with NetBoot. You could use also file, so another thing that we've been doing is using FileVault on our build drives. FileVault 2, actually, full disk encryption. You're asking, why would I want to do this if I'm already running BIC in secure mode? Well, if your master disk image would be available on the build drive. If somebody got a hold of it, they could just copy that and take it. So if you care about that, you can actually boot from a file vaulted boot drive and protect all of your contents further there too. There are lots of other tricks that you could do with encrypted disk images, mounting those, and keeping that secure if you want to do that, which is what we do for our project, large deployment here at Penn State. So, You don't need to enable Fall Vault, but if you're worried about security, I would definitely recommend it. And the speeds, I was surprised. You would think they'd be really slowed down. I didn't see much of a decrease in it, actually. Very important for fast restores, too. When you're making disk images with disk utility, and Instant Image, I believe, does this by default. Is that right, Rich? Compressed? Okay, excellent. You want to compress the disk image. And I think I talked to a gentleman last year, and he raised a good question. Well, if I'm compressing a disk image, and it's like 120, and it goes down to 70 gigs, we've had images that big. I know, it's crazy. Final Cut, anyone? You would think, the initial thinking maybe for some folks is like, why would I compress it? Because that's going to take more time to decompress that data after I read it off the disk. Surprisingly, it's not. Compressed disk images, also they need to be scanned, and we'll talk about that, restore faster than if you didn't compress it. I didn't think that was true, but after benchmark, they do. But what's important, though, if you don't, especially recently, we had a disk image where, I won't name, somebody, it wasn't me, somebody, of course not, somebody actually created a new master lab image for our labs, forgot to actually scan it, and BIC didn't have an option there yet to say, don't restore this unless it's been scanned, right? Well, I didn't add that yet, but now I do. Because the restore should have taken about 45 minutes. If it's not scanned, it was already compressed, but if it's not scanned and optimized for restoring, it took 4 hours. And we ran and we're like, that hard drive must be dead. There must be something wrong here. But it worked. I was like, oh. And then, so sure enough, it wasn't scanned for restore. It's an easy step. Again, it's documented, a good document on my website, but we were floored by how much slower it was. So definitely scan your disk images. Even if, whatever tool you use, make sure you scan them for restore. It's an option that's in disk utility, and well documented as well. And I have extensive run logs. Rusty makes fun of me because the run logs are really verbose. But hey, wouldn't you rather have verbose logs than none at all? I think so. Okay, they need to be cleaned up, but they're very, they're verbose. So, all right. So, moving on to support. So BIC, there's the website, /BIC. It'll be a redirect to the full website. I've got lots of documentation there. There's also a support and email list on that website as well, where you can post questions, feature requests, gripes, if they're nice. But definitely want to know what's working, what's not working, because if you're affected by it, we're gonna be affected by it in our own labs too. So it's important to have a good discussion there. Apple has good server documentation too. They still have. Okay. Apple still has a really good document for 10.6 server. A lot of it's still applicable today about system imaging practices. It's for 10.6, like I mentioned, but it still has a lot of things that are still applicable even today. I looked for an updated version before this presentation to see if they have one for 10.8. They don't. But the top URL, rather, Apple/OS 10 server specs, that's where you'll find additional documentation. Highly recommended you go and read those. Which, actually what our Apple SE recommended, it's a good idea. Download all the documentations there, throw them in a folder, let them get indexed by Spotlight. Then you can just search for anything you're looking in that folder in the Finder window, and it's a quick way to find information that way. Future development, workflow editor later this year, and I'll be supporting the next major OS version of OS 10, which will be 10.9, I'm sure, Nittany Lion, right? We are. And new features based on the needs of Penn State and you. And people on the list. I had a lot of stuff there because, like I said, this is one of the I'm very passionate about lessons. I really enjoy developing it. I want it to work because if it doesn't, then it really affects our labs. And it's critical for some Penn State projects. So that's what I have for that. Okay, moving on to the summary. Good. We're going to have time for Q&A. Good. Again, no servers are required unless you want to use them and leverage them. Then you can. So if you have servers and you have a good networking infrastructure, I'd highly recommend using them if you can, whenever possible. Rich? Right. There is through the auto run configs. So the way, yeah, I don't blame you. in the workflow setting, yeah, that's a good question. In the workflow settings, I've got 2 key lines you can set. It sounds like I said key lime. That's funny. 2 settings for computer name and bonjour name. You can specify and automatically fill in the serial number of the machine. The rest of them, though, are currently static right now. But that's a feature that I've had a few people request, and so that definitely would be probably pretty easy to add. So let me know, yeah, if you want that. So, hold on sorry, what? Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's okay. That's fine. Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's request number. Yep. Right. Not currently. That's feature request number 3 right now. So yes. Yeah, that would actually be, yes, that would be pretty easy to do. That's not there today. It could be there by the end of the year. Definitely. So if you end up using it, you like it, contact me, let me know and say, hey, now we'd really like this feature. I'll say, yeah, sure, great. I love programming. I'd rather do that than use it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Somebody else had a question? No? Oh. Yeah. Oh, so you're going into a lab and you don't care what the number is, you just want it to be unique? And increment the number, lab. Uh-huh. Okay. That'd probably be best fitting for the suggestion. Yeah, it seems like a better, because otherwise it'd be kind of weird, I think, if I went into a lab, I had 50 machines and one was 49 over here and number 2 is right next to it. For me, that personally would be confusing. The unique identifier could be the serial number, and then you could use a table that says, yeah, that might, and then, yep, 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 yep. That's a good point. So just making sure, taking notes here. Good questions. I appreciate them. Okay, great. Oh, sure. Yes. For demonstration purposes, I left it small and thin on purpose. That's right. But yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Yeah, it goes back to the whole monolithic image. It's really big. 100 gigs isn't unheard of. We've had some images that go like, and that's everything. That's all the applications, and then we still have a post-install package. We said, oops, we forgot to add something. Great, let's just add it to that package installer and not have to worry about rebaking the image and go home for the night, wait for it to cook. So it's, right. Uh-huh. Yep. Right. It does. And as I heard somebody else mention, in their image that they deploy, they actually do a few apps. Even though it's thin imaging, they still add Adobe CS and Office because they know everybody wants that. But then they separate the other ones out as a separate package installer later. Because, yeah, the slant that we took years ago was we wanted our system disk image to, well, we didn't want it to be big. But we wanted the time it takes for a machine to be ready for a lab quick. Because a lot of systems today, they are network bound, right? You can have a thin image that's very small, compressed 2 gigs, right? But now it boots up and has nothing on it. Well, now it's not going to get all those packages installed for a day. And that may be okay if you have spare machines in your back room, and then it's ready by the next morning. For most people, that's going to be fine. But if you have a lab machines, you need to get ready really quickly, like your instructor's banging on your door, and where are the applications? You may use a larger image that has the base core applications that they definitely need, and then have something else that installs them afterwards, Monkey or Repository and things like that. Rich? Oh, okay. Mhm. Right. Yep. If you search for Rich Trout in the packages, you'll definitely find him. You might find a few things on file vaults too, also. So yeah, no, yeah, we've used Rich's stuff a lot. So thanks, Rich. Yeah, Rich, and I'll mention his scripts again. He's got a really good GitHub repository, and where there are a bunch of lab configuration scripts, Java fixes, and things like that. So that's what's great about GitHub and Git in general. A very good collaborative environment. And thanks, Rich, for putting those out, because it helps a lot of people build on those too. So yeah, that's a great point. Other questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. Now you're going to get a biased opinion, of course. So, Blast Image Config is not as pretty as Deploy Studio. Deploy Studio has some nicer drag things of different options. It has some more flexibility with some of the options. Because I mostly use Blast Image Config, I'm not as familiar with Deploy Studio, but I have used it in the past. To my knowledge today, and if anybody in the room knows otherwise and knows it better than I do, please speak up. But I don't believe Deploy Studio can do what BIC does with regards to old firmware passwords. So in other words, you have to manually type that in the Deploy Studio run process. It doesn't have a secure database where it stores the previous history of firmware passwords. So that would be a hang-up and that's where BIC has an advantage. Because BIC does not require a server at all, but it can leverage one if you need to. Deploy Studio requires a server. Deploy Studio, you don't know who the developers are, and if they're ever going to watch this video on YouTube. That's not a dig on them. I understand that they want to be careful potentially, so that they want Deploy Studio to live on it. So do I. I think it's the more tools in the Mac IT place, the better. However, not knowing who the developers are of it kind of worries me a little bit sometimes. I'm not trying to imply that they're going to lose support for it or anything like that. That just bothers me. I don't know. We don't know who the developers are, and that I don't like personally. I have my suspicions, but I'm glad the tool's out there. It's a very good tool. What's that? Yeah, and it's sure it's probably a fruit company affiliated thing, and so it's a great. So don't misread me here. I'm not saying Deploy Studio is a very good utility, and we thought about should I continue writing BIC, but BIC is very applicable for what we need, and it does some things that we have. There's an internal mode also that we enable to read a large XML file. It says, what campus are you? And you select the campus. If it's Altoona campus, for example, Chris is in the back, and they use this. You can then specify network settings of this particular location. So we've got some other additional custom features in it that Deploy Studio, they're just not going to write for us. Even if I talk to them and beg them, it's not going to help a lot of other people. It'd be a very Penn State specific thing. It is not open source. It is freeware. It's not open source. I don't know if I can make it open source because of my intellectual property stuff with Penn State. I just don't know. I need to check into it. It's written in Real Studio. So Real Studio is a great IDE environment, object-oriented language, and it creates standalone executables. They're not interpreted or anything. It's compiled. It's using them, right now, BIC is a Carbon app. It'll be Cocoa later this year, so they've got some really good frameworks to make applications, and I think it's a great IDE environment. So, but it's not open source right now, but free. And the code is in my group, so if I go out of the department, the code is still there, and it will continue to live on because we have the code fully sourced. So, yes? Uh-huh. I'm sorry? I can tell you. The one on And I actually just made the video. I updated it to make sure. So one of the images, here's the workflow, by the way. But the restore images, I've got an alias. And 1 point, no, that's not right, that's the alias. It is, oh, okay. That one's about 5.76 gigs. And I think it took about 3 minutes, I think, 3 and something. Now that was installing to a very slow USB external hard drive. So it could be faster. Where I've seen it really excel is on HTTP. It was really fast. I mean, I had one image, a 10.7 image, I think I got it down to like, I thought it had failed because it was so fast, but it would report if it did. 1 minute and 40 seconds, something like that. I was like, holy cow. But I was on local gig, same switch, HTTP. So benchmark it. See how it works for on AFP, SMB, and HTTP. If you do serve disk images over HTTP, you need to segment them. There's documentation out there that'll describe how to do this. But for Apache version less than 2, correct me on this if anybody knows, it couldn't deliver files safely over 2 gigs. Sorry. So what you would do is you would take a disk image. If it's over 1.9 gigs, you'd segment it into multiple pieces. So if you just Google for OS 10 disk image segment, you'll find out there's a command that you can use and supply the disk image, and it'll break it up for you. HDI util, I think, does that. HDI util or disk util. I think it's HDI util that can do the segment. So that's how you do that if you want to go over HTTP. Any other questions? 1.3, I think you're right. Does Apache 2 lift that restriction? Is it 4 gigs now? Or is it more? Is it? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think I did it by accident. It was a newer version of Apache and it worked, and I said, oh, okay, right. Yeah, I think you're right. Apache 1.3 had the limitation of 2 gigs or less per file. You are? Oh, okay. Oh. And that's good to go? Okay. Alright, cool. Yeah, I would think. Okay, cool. Yeah, Apache 1.3 is just a very old code base. Very stable. But, yeah, okay. That's good to know. Any other questions at all about system imaging in general? System imaging or BIC? Just the whole field? I think you're still going to always need to get the base OS on a machine. That's a good question because everybody keeps wondering. Nick should address the issue that you were talking about also. System special build. Thin imaging, definitely thin imaging. You use whatever tool you want to use. Install base small image, and thereafter it's got its own system daemon, whether it be Jamf, all the others. And then it downloads those packages and installs that way, and then you do a hybrid mix between the two. Again, installing applications that are big on the thin image, which then turns out not to be so thin, but, I think that's it, because you still need an OS to boot up a machine. A lot of people are doing remote applications now. I've been seeing more of that, especially at Penn State. We've got some remote applications for Windows applications. Richard Glazer is actually presenting later this week on Aqua Connect, OS 10 terminal services. So, there's a lot of pushback. It's kind of funny back from the terminal days. I mean, I worked on a Zenith thing in college. And IBM 370 system, assembly language, DR14, anyone? Okay. So, it's kind of funny, we're kind of moving back to terminal type things and maybe meshing them a little bit. So, I think you still need Google OS. Before I get to mention, though, Nick was asking a question. What do you do if you have a new machine that comes out? And let's say a new Mac Mini comes out, it's running 10.8.3 dot something special. The 10.8.3 in the Apple Store is the last GM version of 10.8.3. It will not work on a newer machine that has a newer version of that. Be very careful about that. What does that mean? That means that you'll basically need to make a special image for that machine until Apple makes the next .rev of 10.8 that should support that and include all the drivers for that as well. So in other words, check, and you can Google for this on Apple's site. Look for a Keybase article, OS 10 build numbers, and they'll tell you what machine shipped with what build number, and they'll have an official build list that says what 10.8.3 is, the GM version versus the special version. Don't make your master build from a special build of OS 10 that was specific for a new Mac. Okay? Don't do that. Wait for the next major rev of 10.8.4, then make it from that, and it should work on everything else beneath it. Otherwise, you'll boot up a machine, you'll get kernel panics, and weird behavior, fans will run, and all that kind of stuff. And this comes up on the Mac Enterprise list every single year. Why do I have to do this? Why won't Apple give us differences of drivers? And you're like, I know I don't like it either, but that's the pros and cons of working with Macs. But Apple's been much better about, in the Apple Store, posting 10.8.3 GM that works with everything you need. So download it whenever you can, and then keep those versions available. Keep track of them if you can. Sure, yeah, we got time for one more question. Yeah. That is... Yeah, exactly. It is actually, I believe it's on Friday. Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, I'll double check here to make sure I'm not crazy. Well, I may be crazy, but I'll still look. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's for everybody to make sure they heard. It's this Friday. Richard Glazer is doing the OS 10 terminal services, and it's OS 10 based. I think he's using Aqua Connect for that, so that's another way to look at it too for more applications. Okay. Looks like I'm out of time. I appreciate everybody coming.